Today's movie will make you cry if you watch it until the end. It's the movie everyone's talking about most right now, because it's a real tearjerker. The movie begins in a very humble apartment. Jania lives with her sick daughter, Arya. After a trip to the hospital, Arya has to sleep with headphones because the neighbor's music can be heard through the thin walls. They wake up early and Jania bathes Arya while reminding her not to play with her science project, since they don't have the money to fix it if it breaks. Arya reminds her mother that the teacher asked for lunch money, and Jania gets frustrated when she learns that the teacher humiliated her daughter in front of the whole class. On her way out, Jania gives a few coins to Benny, a man in a wheelchair. Her landlady sees this and yells at her because she hasn't paid the rent yet. The landlady reminds her that she's already filed for eviction. So Jania tells her she'll bring the money during her lunch break after getting paid at work. In return, Jania asks her to tell the neighbor to turn down the music, but the landlady refuses, saying they have the right because they pay rent. When Jania drops Arya off at school, she promises to bring her lunch money during her break. She greets the principal, who looks at her with shock and confusion. Then Jania goes to her job at the supermarket, which is already crowded with people. Her boss Richard doesn't even say hello and urges her to get to work because one of the cashiers called in sick. Richard and the customers insult her just because she's walking at a normal pace to her station. A woman tries to pay for all her groceries with a benefits card and Jania explains that some items aren't eligible. The customer gets angry and leaves without buying anything. Then her husband throws a bottle at Jania as they're leaving. Richard complains about the mess and orders Jania to clean it up quickly before someone slips. The other customers also complain because they have to wait longer. While Jania goes to get the cleaning supplies, her co-worker notices how much she's suffering and tries to lend her some money. However, Jania refuses because she knows her friend needs it too, and they'll be paid today anyway. At that moment, Jania receives a call from the school because Arya didn't bring lunch money and has a suspicious injury. Jania tells them she fell in the bathtub, but the teachers remain suspicious. Richard finds Jania on the phone and forces her to hang up. So Jania begs him until he agrees to give her a 30-minute break so she can rush to the school to resolve the issue. She also asks him for her salary, but he refuses. Next, Jania stops at the bank to withdraw her last $47 for Arya's lunch, but the ATM says, insufficient funds, even though she has money in her account. The manager Nicole explains that ATMs won't dispense money if it would leave the account with less than the minimum required to keep it open. Jania decides to close the account, but to do so she has to wait in a very long line so she leaves with nothing. Then, Jania arrives at the school and screams when she sees her daughter being taken away by Child Protective Services. She begs for mercy and explains that Arya is sick, so she needs special medication, but she is ignored. Jania launches into a tirade, explaining how she works 2 jobs while having a breakdown and hears a piercing sound in her ears, as if her reality is collapsing. After picking up the bag that fell from Arya, Jania goes back to work in the rain. She's in such a hurry that she accidentally cuts off Oliver and nearly crashes. Oliver yells at her and throws a drink at her car. Jania keeps moving forward, but Oliver says he'll make her regret it and starts following her. Suddenly he hits her car with his own, causing her to skid on the water. Jania stops the vehicle before anything happens, but then she can't get it to start again. When she gets out of the car to check the engine, she's approached by a police officer, so she tells him about the guy who was chasing her. However, it turns out Oliver is a cop too, so he threatens Jania, saying he'll find a way to shoot her legally. After the officer sends Oliver away, she asks Jania for her documents, which are expired. Jania desperately explains that she'll renew them today after she gets paid, but the officer still has her car impounded. Jania has no choice but to walk home. Richard immediately yells at her because she's wet and took 2 hours instead of 30 minutes, so he ends up firing her. When Jania asks for her pay, Richard spitefully tells her that fired employees get their check in the mail and refuses to give it to her even when she points out that it's right there on his desk. Then, Jania goes home and finds all her belongings soaked in the street because her landlord has evicted her. Jania can only scream in frustration as she tries to pick up her things. A few minutes later, she goes back to the store to tell Richard that she won't leave without the check. At that moment, a man walks into the office and asks her something about a product, using her name because he reads it on her badge. Suddenly, he pulls out a weapon as a second robber appears and they force Robert to give them all the money from the safe. They want Jania's bag to hide the money, but she fights back because it contains Arya's medication. After a lot of struggle, Jania manages to take the guy's weapon and shoots him. Then the other robber runs away. Robert yells at her and he accuses her of having organized it because the thief knew his name, so he calls the police. With her mind trapped in a dizzying fog, Jania continues to endure Robert's shouting until she snaps and shoots him too. Then, Jania takes her check and rushes to the bank to cash it. The security guard tells her they're closed, but Nicole takes pity on her and lets her in. Unfortunately, the teller asks for an ID and Jania doesn't have one because the police officer took all her documents with the car. She explains her situation, but the employee refuses to help her, so Jania snaps again and reveals that she still has the gun. The teller presses the emergency button, and soon Nicole receives a call from the authorities. She describes Jania to them and tells them she has a bomb because she mistook Arya's art project for a bomb. Meanwhile, detectives Raymond and Grimm examine the crime scene in the store, and Jania's actions are clearly visible on the security footage. When they question the employees, Jania's friend defends her and tries to explain that she would never do something like that. However, she is so upset that her friend is in trouble that Grimm thinks she is hiding something. Raymond thinks there's more to the story and sends her to look for more clues. Next, the detectives question Jania's landlady while looking through her belongings on the street. They find Arya's medication, and Benny explains that the girl was sick. They also speak very highly of Jania. The detectives want to search the apartment, but the landlady won't let them. At that moment, they get a call about the bank, so they leave. At the bank, the tellers give Jania all their money because they think she's robbing them, so she tries to explain that she just wants to cash her check. Nicole gives her phone to the guards so they can receive instructions, then she tries to tell the other customers to leave. However, they don't understand what's going on and stay. Jania calls Nicole for help, and Nicole manages to explain to the tellers that they only need to give her the money from the check. Jania is losing her mind more and more with each passing second and launches into a tirade of frustration, but this scares the others because they think she might become violent. At that moment, the cops surround the building. Grimm tells the chief that Jania organized the store robbery, but Raymond thinks she just had a bad mental reaction to the situation. Inside, a customer finally notices Jania's gun and tries to tackle her, causing Jania to accidentally fire into the air. The customer and the guard panic and run out of the building, and the cops surround them. The customer explains that the shot went off by accident and complains because the guard didn't do anything. The cashiers are crying and hiding, so Jania yells at them while launching into a tirade, saying she just wants her daughter's lunch money. She freezes when she realizes that the journalist on TV is talking about her, saying she's robbing the bank and has murdered her boss. The chief calls the bank, but when Jania hears it's the police, she hangs up. Then the negotiator arrives with a special truck, but Raymond convinces the chief that Jania will be more willing to talk to another woman, and she also has negotiation experience. Raymond calls the bank again and asks Nicole to put her on speakerphone. She asks questions about the gunshot and Jania panics, explaining that it was an accident. She keeps screaming as she loses her mind, but Grimm realizes she's not trying to rob the bank and speaks calmly, showing sympathy and calling the incident a misunderstanding. However, when Raymond asks her to come out and promises to help her, Jania loses control again. She says they just want to lock her up like they locked up her daughter and that no one ever helps her. When Nicole tells her to let the customers out, Jania yells that she's not holding them and hangs up again. Then, Nicole gives Jania the money from her check. Jania sets aside the $40 needed for school lunch and asks Nicole to bring them to Arya because she knows the police won't let her do it. When she sees the cops taking position on TV, she has the cashiers close the front door blinds. The cops in the van have access to the security cameras and are worried about the bomb. One of the cashiers then secretly starts live streaming the situation. When an elderly customer says she needs to sit down, Jania immediately asks Nicole to bring her a chair. The other customers ask her to let them out, but Jania is convinced that once she's alone, the police will shoot her. Two of the customers leave anyway, so Jania has Nicole lock the door. At that moment, Arya's science project starts beeping, so Nicole and the police think it's over, but Jania simply turns it off. Saying that she needs to think, Jania goes into one of the offices. The cashiers want to take the opportunity to leave, but Nicole tells them not to move because they don't know how Jania will react. She comes back with chairs for everyone, explaining that she knows what it's like to stand all day. Raymond sees this and tells the chief that real criminals aren't this nice. A cop enters the truck saying they've gotten the bank's blueprints, so he wants to go in with flashbang grenades. However, the chief doesn't want to take any risks because of the bomb. Some cops think they should call the FBI, but Raymond thinks that's ridiculously over the top. Obviously, it's just a desperate woman, and she hasn't even hurt anyone. So Raymond wants to give her a chance, while the FBI would probably kill her on the spot. The chief agrees and has Raymond call the bank again. Jania hates the sound of ringing phones and wants to turn them off, but Nicole convinces her that the police might help her reunite with her daughter. As soon as Jania picks up, she starts to explain the whole situation, and Raymond finally understands why she thinks they won't help her. Jania remembers Oliver and thinks he's there to shoot her, just like he promised. She mentions what really happened during the store robbery, the problem with her check, her daughter's medication and injury, her 2 jobs, her evictions, and all the other details of her terrible life. Since the cashier's phone is still streaming, the video goes viral and people all over the city start to feel sorry for her. A tearful Raymond shows her understanding by sharing that she grew up in a similar situation and promises to help her, but she has to leave. This makes Jania furious again and she says she won't come out as long as there are cops outside, then she hangs up. Raymond is devastated because this brings up all her personal issues. She has to get out of the truck to get some air. When the boss discovers that Jania is being recorded, he orders his men to jam the signal. At the same time, Jania realizes that the security cameras are on and asks Nicole to take her to the switch. One of the cashiers takes the opportunity to try to leave, but the door is locked. Jania turns off all the cameras, leaving the cops with no way to know what's going on. Then she comes back and the others tell her they need to go to the bathroom. So Jania lets them go one by one. Outside, Raymond and Grimm check the system, but they can't find the cop who attacked Jania. People start gathering behind the police because they're demanding Jania's freedom. Back inside the bank, one of the tellers complains because Jania is being treated like a martyr. So Nicole and the old lady scold her for her lack of sympathy. Then, Nicole notices that Jania is cold and explains that the air conditioning is always strong here, offering to lend her a jacket. They go to the office and Jania puts on the jacket while noticing a family photo on the desk. They talk about the children, and Nicole reassures Jania that she is a good mother, which she knows because she has seen it every time Jania has come to the bank. She tries to convince her to ask for help, but Jania is still afraid of Oliver. In the evening, the FBI arrives, and Jania worries about all the noise. Jania sends Nicole to the door to check, and they learn that the crowd is shouting, "Free Jania!" On the news, they can see the crowd chanting her name with large signs demanding her rights. A reporter talks to the activists, and even Benny is there, sharing how Jania has always helped him, even when she had nothing. The chief tries to convince the FBI that they have the situation under control and that Jania will surrender peacefully, but he doesn't listen. Jania remembers that Nicole convinced her to open her account here and wonders why she cares so much. In her career, Nicole has seen many women ignored or cheated by bureaucracy, so she requested a transfer to this place, hoping to make things easier for the humble people in need in this neighborhood. The tellers complain about the heat with no air conditioning and Jania shares that this is the temperature she has to endure every night to sleep. When the old lady says kind words, Jania apologizes for everything and explains that something inside her broke when her daughter was in the hospital. Because she doesn't have insurance, the doctors never really treated Arya well, not even during her premature birth. She wouldn't mind going to prison if it weren't for Arya, since she knows that foster homes won't treat her illness. Nicole promises that she will take care of Arya so that Jania can be at peace. At that moment, the old lady announces that she isn't feeling well and reveals that she is diabetic. Jania allows Nicole to take her out and apologizes again. As soon as the old lady is rescued by the police, Nicole ignores Raymond's pleas and goes back inside, saying that Jania has no one but her. The next time someone calls the bank, it's the FBI. He doesn't let her talk to Raymond, so she starts to lose it again and hands the phone to Nicole. At that moment, Arya's science project starts beeping again, and Nicole hangs up, thinking the call is the problem. Jania turns off the beeping and mentions the science project. Leaving Nicole and the cashiers in shock, they explain that they thought it was a bomb, and Jania finally understands why the cops and the FBI are acting this way. A cashier asks to go to the bathroom and uses her lipstick to write a message on the window. The bomb isn't real and there's only one weapon. Jania tells Nicole to call the police and clear up the misunderstanding, but Nicole refuses because she thinks the bomb is the only thing keeping the agents from coming in. Instead, she thinks he should go out without the backpack. Meanwhile, Raymond finds the officer who towed Jania's car. At first, she doesn't share any more details, but Raymond gets angry and forces her to confess that Oliver made the threats. A furious Raymond rushes at Oliver and punches him in the face, which the crowd cheers. When the chief hears what he did, he takes Oliver away. The phone in the truck rings and the FBI refuses to answer. Raymond and the chief have had enough of their cold attitude, so Raymond takes the call. She tells Jania that they've arrested Oliver, but Jania wants proof. If he sends her a photo by text, she will come out without the weapon or the backpack. However, the FBI refuses to wait for the photo and wants to send the men inside. A desperate Raymond runs to the door and gives her phone to Jania with a photo of Oliver. Jania is relieved and lets everyone leave, but Nicole stays to help. She takes Jania's hand and promises to visit her in prison with Arya. At that moment, Jania receives a call from her mother, who has been visited by the FBI. Jania starts to talk about everything that happened, and her mother interrupts her to remind her that Arya is dead. It turns out that the girl did not survive a seizure last night, and Jania hallucinated her presence, the call from the school, and social services taking Arya away. Nicole was informed by the police over the phone, but didn't say anything so as not to make things worse. While Jania tries to come to terms with this, the FBI breaks down the doors and the skylight to take Jania down. However, this too is a hallucination, and Nicole helps her come out of it. Nicole guides Jania out of the building with her hands in the air. Raymond is also gentle when she arrests her, and Jania is taken to a police car while the crowd continues to show their support. So there you have it, we've reached the end of this film. Let me know in the comments if it made you shed a tear too. And above all, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss my next videos.